So now as we go on and we continue our discussion about the threat of new entrants versus the threat of substitute products, I think we decided that the electric car or the hydrogen car, these would all be substitute products, right? As well as if you talk about a motorcycle, okay, or even an airplane or a helicopter, those would be substitute products. You might see this because the pricing of the products becomes too high, and so people go to substitute products. Or maybe there's another factor, like the price of oil goes up too much, right? And if the price of oil goes up too much, then you go to substitute products, okay? But generally, there's a substitute product. There are situations, for example, drugs, right? There may be only one drug to treat a certain form of cancer. If you're dying from that form of cancer, now you have what's called price elasticity, right? You would pay any amount of money to have that drug, which is going to save your life. Okay? So these two, the threat of new entrants and the threat of substitute products, those view the companies within an industry in relationship to each other. Okay? So the industry might be transportation. Okay? And you can have new companies being created. If there are huge profits being made, new companies get created, right? Or if all of a sudden an industry gets too high priced or technology is moving too fast, you can have moving into substitute products. Okay? The last two, Michael Porter talks about the intensity of competitive rivalry. We add a sixth, which is the stakeholders. This talks about the industry in relationship to other industries. Okay? So the intensity of competitive rivalry is an observation that certain industries are just more competitive than others. Okay? So if you take a look, for example, at agriculture versus cell phones. Okay? Cell phones are a pretty competitive industry, right? Agriculture, there's just not that much change taking place. Again, getting away from numbers, but just talking about concepts of quantifying things, just take a look at product half-lives. How long is a product on the market on average until it's replaced? In the cell phone industry, boom, 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 boom. In agriculture, we'll be eating tomatoes 50 years from now, right? And they'll probably be dumb on teeth, okay? So it's just the turnover of brands, the turnover of products, the turnover is just much less, okay? Now, if you talk about the stakeholders, obviously, different industries have different stakeholders, okay? If you're talking about the drug industry, well, you got lots of stakeholders in there, right? You've got insurance companies who are either going to pay for or not pay for the product. That affects pricing decisions, okay? You've got the government regulating the products, okay? You've got hospitals that are going to be involved in making the decision about which product to administer, okay? You start talking about cell phones, you don't have as many stakeholders, right? So it should be, a lot easier to buy or sell a cell phone. That last factor, stakeholders, the reason we include that is that it generally tends to correlate with profitability, okay? If you've got a lot of regulatory barriers to entry, it's harder to get in, but once you're in there, it's easier to make money because the stakeholders tend to exclude competition.
So this is the barriers to entry part of for the 5 methods.
Porter only uses 5, we use 6, and the reason we really view ourselves as using 3 sets of 2.
I thought, okay.
So we're using 2 for just analyzing the company in isolation, which is its bargaining power with buyers and suppliers.
Right.
We're using 2 for the company in regards to other companies in its industry, right, which is the threat of new entrants and the threat of substitute products. And then we use 2 for judging the industry relative to other industries, right? And that's the intensity of competitiveness of the industry, which is often the proxy for how fast technology is changing.
They say barriers to entry into the industry.
Well, but the problem with using barriers to entry as a variable is it applies in so many different situations. Okay, so a barrier to entry could apply to the threat of new entrants. It could also apply to the threat of substitute products. I mean, if let's say you have a barrier to entry and that it's very hard to start a company. Okay, let's say a barrier to entry would be producing oil. Right, a huge barrier to entry there because most of the oil is in the Persian Gulf, right? Okay, and if you don't have the land, you don't have the natural resource. Okay, But then there's substitute products, nuclear energy, wind, solar. I mean, you can always get around it. So the barrier to entry is certainly a relevant variable, and you're going to take a look at the success or failure of a company. It's just there are many different ways in which it can be applied, right? Is it a barrier to your negotiations with your buyers, your suppliers, your relationships with other firms, or in the industry as a whole? One barrier to entry might be very high, but if technology is changing rapidly, okay, even though you had a barrier to entry, which was a great brand name, like Microsoft, technology changes very fast. All of a sudden, Google goes nowhere 10 years ago, right? It comes out of nowhere, and all of a sudden it's passing Microsoft, just because the technology is changing very fast. Microsoft is sitting there with a great brand name, all these patents that just beaten Apple. They were thinking of themselves pretty clever, right? Technology is changing fast, right? It goes around it. So we have gone through the Porter's analysis as one way of making an analysis of companies without making use of numbers. Another type of analysis you can use is what's called a SWOT analysis. Okay? So a SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. A SWOT analysis would start off with something like, let's use, shall we use Google again? What would be a strength of Google? So a strength of Google might be its brand, right? Google's got a good brand. Low cost of sales. I don't think Google has almost any sales. I don't think they advertise, do they? Easy to produce. Yeah, I mean, they're complex programs, I'm sure, but boy, once you produce them, they don't cost anything to use, right? They last forever. What would be a weakness? Product turnover. Well, as we talked with Microsoft being supplanted by Google, that's the thing about technology. You're really not quite sure what's going to come along next that could replace Google, right? It's certainly a rapidly changing environment. Lack of product differentiation. Well, I mean, there are all sorts of different ways of advertising, right? So these pop-up ads, or these people that buy real estate on websites, and they can move ads into and out of them as they need be. I mean, these are all sorts of different ways of doing Google's business model, and it's difficult to differentiate. Okay, high tax expense. Google's located in California, right? They've got high state taxes, right? And you also have the federal taxes. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend showing that our corporate tax rate in the U.S. is the highest in the world. Okay? So if this is the case, that's a weakness for Google, because it's in Mountain View. What's a opportunity with Google? Well, expense rationalization options. They're still sort of in their growth phase at Google, so I don't know if they're really to the point where that's an opportunity to rationalize on expenses. New markets to be open? Well, Google does that all the time, right? They do it in an interesting way. I mean, Google offers a new product not because they want to make any money out of it, but they want your eyeballs, right? They got your eyeballs, they feel like they're winning. Okay? And new, I should say new product lines, and then new markets that can be opened where they're already on the internet. I don't really know that that's an opportunity for Google. Although, they are going into video now, and they're going into radio, so maybe there is an opportunity for them to get into new markets. Now, what would be a threat? See, generally, if you take a look at how this is set up, the opportunities are the inverses of the strengths, and the weaknesses and the threats are related. Okay? So, if you take a look here at the threats, we talk about new products, right? So a weakness would be product turnover. A threat would be new products coming out. Ask.com. Some people say that has even a better search engine than Google. Okay. Switching to substitute products. Well, I mean, there's always old line advertising, right? And then key man risk. Remember, there are two principals at Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. They have a 767 now that they fly around and go to their different meetings on. Airplanes crash. What happened if those two guys went down? I mean, the company surely would continue to operate, but would it innovate as well? And I think they pretty much do have key man risk there, and I think those guys do travel together.